Monsanto told me how not to be.
So we've had this place for the last 8 years, and it's the 9th year running. And I think for the two of us, it was just about like coming back to play and starting something of our own. And as you can see, this is like Marathi architecture. We try to use local materials, and we try and go organic as much as possible. And for us to have Dr. Shiva here is like a big honor. And I hope it's the start of a new beginning. And thank you so much for coming.
Thank you. Well, first of all, thank you, both of you, for creating such a beautiful space. And both because it shows what is possible. Yeah. And that anything that builds on long-lasting traditions can never be ugly. Yeah. You've created a lot of beauty. Maybe you want to tell people who are coming here for the first time just what the construction is, because I think it's absolutely amazing. Just tell them the materials you use.
So what we use is local wood. So there's only poplar and willow growing here. So these beams and these sticks, they're all from willow, and these are poplar. And mud walls. And this stone is from Chilling. It's from a little valley that is like from Indus side. Yeah. And these are like the river stones. And we had an Swiss Italian architect who worked with us for this.
It's ironic, but yeah.
It's ironic, yeah. But he was also working with this foundation that is Loti out here. They're restoring the whole town. So I think it just worked for us.
And you know, you've seen the willow branches harvested everywhere. And that's the stability it's providing. And I'm just thinking of probably my first official study by the Ministry of Environment, 1982. It was 82 or 81 maybe. And it was about mining in Doon Valley. You know, mountains like that in our valley were being mined for limestone. And where's the limestone going to make cement? Where are the conflicts of India today, where they're mining iron ore? For all of that iron and steel that goes into laying a when there's such light ways to build with absolutely renewable material. So for me, cultural diversity and biodiversity are the essence of life. You know? Because anything that, first of all, anything that threatens biodiversity also threatens cultural diversity. And whatever threatens both threatens the foundations of any society. So let me just give you a few examples. For those of you who were there in the Women's Alliance, I just mentioned the farmers' suicides. Now, you know, I've watched this country in pre-Green Revolution times. I've, of course, been around to deal with the globalization phenomena, because there are really two aspects that directly affect our societies today, beginning with agriculture. One is the idea that without chemicals you can't produce food. And the second is the idea that if you trade long distance, everyone wins, you know, everyone from Clinton to Blair. Everyone used to say in those early days when I was fighting GATT and WTO, when the sea rises, all boats rise. No, but when you create a typhoon, many boats sink. And for me, this thing called free trade and globalization is a typhoon. I mean, just midnight yesterday, they announced a whole new tax system. And if you look at any item, the indigenous is taxed more. So regional movies are taxed more. Yeah? Handcrafted fabric is taxed more. Which is why the Banarsi shops are shutting down. Ayurveda is taxed at 12%. Pick anything. What is made locally is taxed more. Well, this is exactly what the British did. When the East India Company came in and got a so-called free trade, that was the first free trade agreement 1716. And the agreement basically was no taxes on us, but more taxes on local people. And because we're invading into areas, we need military defense against the local people. 16 onwards, we started to take over trade in 1757, of course, you had the Battle of Plassey. So I have watched large parts of India, which had good agriculture and good culture. You know, you'd go at festival time, and they'd be wearing their local coats, they'd be serving their local foods, and they would be having festivals. And the farms were full of diversity. I mean, just like in Ladakh, it is a high altitude desert. But look at that little piece of land where they can get a bit of irrigation from the glacial melt. How much they produce. Look at all the food and the diversity the women were working with at the Women's Alliance. So the nature of nature, no matter where you are, is diversity. And nature of culture is diversity. And the reason there is diversity in the world is because there is self-organization. The tiniest of cells is self-organized. The tiniest of plants is self-organized. The smallest of communities is self-organized. And that then creates the expressions of diversity. Uniformity never evolves, it is imposed. So you see uniformity and you can understand there's an imposition. The imposition could be by authority, or it could be by advertising. It could be all advertising is creating a sense of inferiority. You know, one other Britisher who came here and said, we'll never conquer this country, it's too prosperous. India's too prosperous. And the only way we can conquer them is make them think they're inferior. We'll change their education. And then everything that is theirs they'll feel is inferior. Everything, and all the junk we bring, they will feel is superior. So look at the invasion of junk food around the world. It's exactly that philosophy. Junk clothing. I mean, I was waiting for the rest of the team that's come on the tour in the lobby of the hotel. And on my head, I think that's partly given my headache, not the altitude so much. They were repeating an ad. Sweat slim vest. You know, bad enough sweat to me. Oh, my tummy, this girl I proposed to, she ticked me off on my tummy. So I got this belt and now my tummy is 4 inches less. And went on. Then this woman says, I love Western clothing, but I couldn't wear it because of my fat belly. And now my sweat swim melt has made me, allowed me to wear my Western clothes. I'm thinking between the sweat swim vest and Western clothing, where is Bharatvarsh going? And there are hundreds of ways to exercise. This morning, again, go back to what the women were doing, whether it was taking out the oil from the mustard. You know, just this gesture of making a chapati or kneading the flour, just this is the best exercise you can have for these joints. Most of the time, people being affected by osteoporosis, this is the part that's getting knocked off. When you don't do the normal work that makes you healthy, you don't eat the normal diet that makes you healthy, and I think someone should do a calculation of how much is being spent on gyms, how much is being spent on medicines. I mean, we've done a calculation for, I think this book is here. So in Navdanya we did I said something's wrong because I went to Punjab after the violence of '84 and found, you know, my eyes could tell me this is not more productive than the farms of Uttarakhand. Just physically I could see there's more growing in our fields than Punjab, which had dwarf wheat. So I decided to start actually calculating and measuring monocultures versus diversity and evolve the biodiversity-based productivity system. After that, we turned it into nutrition. And this health per acre, which is available on the Navdanya website, we could feed 2 Indias. Except that Ladakh would feed its people with different crops and different foods, both because the climate allows different things, but also because of the climate, the body requires different things. And then last year, I decided to turn this into a true cost accounting. There's huge demand for this book. I've just been told I must carry 6 more. And at that point, for me, the big issue was because the market is constantly calculating what's growing, yeah, but it's never calculating what's disappearing. Yeah. I was counting how many farm suicides were taking place, and there was no counting of it. But the trade in BT cotton was being counted. So we said, okay, there is a way in which deaths are assessed by insurance companies. And we took that for the suicides, and it is 98 billion annually, the cost. If someone was being held responsible, I hold Monsanto and the agribusiness corporations responsible. And we did a tribunal in October, precisely to put all this together. We did the environmental costs, and and social costs adds up to 1.26 trillion a year. If you add to this the health damage of chemicals and bad food, and bad food is bad in 3 ways. First, of course, it has chemicals. Second, it has no nutrition. And third, it has the wrong combinations because they're increasingly doing fortification. The combination of all of this means new diseases that were not, it's not that no one had cancer, but cancer was exceptional. People had diabetes, but it was an epidemic. Hypertension. Every second person didn't have hypertension. So I just worked out, now 2 years ago the government was launching this smart city thing. We said, let's start food smart cities. Like a food smart cafe. And we just looked at the data on how much is India spending on chronic diseases, medicines for chronic diseases. It doesn't account the cost of the discomfort of the person and of the person dying of cancer. It just doesn't and the treatment. Add it all up, that's another 20. India's GDP is 1.2. Just the externality of one sector, chemical agriculture, that is shifting things to monocultures. But take another aspect to it. So, all the portions where, all the areas where there's distress, farmers have been pushed to monocultures. And they're waiting for either the government or a corporation to come and buy. My son, I'm now talking of so long ago, my son was still in school outside Bangalore. And going to visit him, there'd be all these women sitting on the roadside with tomatoes. And they're telling me, please take it. Because if you don't take it, we have to destroy it. Because it costs us this much to buy the seed, it costs us this much to buy the chemicals. We are getting 50 pies. And it will take us 2 rupees a kilo to deliver it to the closest town. It's just not worth it for us, we'd rather destroy it. And this is happening with milk in Europe, it's happening with milk in America, it's happening with everything that was food but has been made a commodity. So the farmer's price keeps falling, consumers pay more. And at 3 levels there's a rip-off with monocultures. First is selling the chemicals and inputs to the farmer, including the seeds of uniformity, then buying from the farmer, and then selling costly to the consumer. But it's also creating the monoculture diet, which is not a diet. So then we brought a copy of, this is our brand new thing on food as health. And we've worked very hard at this. Of course, I've been working at, Navdanya, we worked with, we monitor the soil. The chemical soils are actually losing their nutrition. You can add nitrogen fertilizer and you have less nitrogen for the plants. Because nitrogen is not made available to the plant directly, it's made available via systems of microorganisms. These are the graphs of the individual nutrition. The chemical monoculture always less in every important trace element in nutrition. And now that there is nutritionally empty food, I was just at the government offices the day before for an experts meeting, and the big money being put in is for biofortification. I mean, the way to deal with malnutrition and nutritional deficiencies is genetically engineered crops. 4 days ago I was in Shillong and I was given lots of purple rice which grows in Manipur. Next day I read they're going to genetically engineer purple rice to increase antioxidants in order to cure cancer. Everything there's purple tomato in Italy. You get it everywhere. There's a British scientist wanting to genetically engineer. So I have called this attitude the monoculture of the mind. And the monoculture of the mind is monoculture in many ways. The first is it sees only one thing. It sees rice, just sees wheat. It just sees timber. Now, a monoculture of the mind could not see that a willow will give you building material. You cannot see it. You want straight eucalyptus to be sent off to a pulp industry. They see raw material. So in a monoculture of the mind, first of all you have uniformity. Second of all you have one-dimensionality. Uniformity is just one culture, one species, one whatever. One-dimensionality is everything that can perform 100,000 functions reduced to one. And the only function that's being talked about today is the function of you fitting into a market. Either as a consumer or you're reduced to raw material yourself to run the machine. So I've just been finally editing my new book, and every day I have to update it because every day something new turns up. We were all told, that you shouldn't be self-employed. You should have jobs. You know, to notice everyone talks jobs. You know where the word job comes from? Anyone in the room? When they were pushing peasants off the land in England, one was they enclosed the commons. And the second was they used to literally pick people up to take them to factories. Nobody wanted to give up a free life to work as a slave in a factory. So to be cheated and to be made to work under deceit was called jobbing. And as always, there were contractors who bring on the people. So the job was what you were cheated to do. Life was what you did under free choice. And now find me one politician who doesn't use the phrase jobs. I'll create jobs. How many lives did you destroy? How many livelihoods did you destroy? You can even count. I'll create jobs. Jobs for America. Mr. Trump's favorite sentence, jobs for America. He thanked our Prime Minister for creating jobs for America. And our Prime Minister saying make in India, but Trump is thanking him for GST, this new trade. Trump is having to thank, which means something got done that will work for Amazon and Walmart. And I don't know how many of you followed that Amazon has just bought up Whole Foods.
Yeah.
The biggest, yeah, they just bought them up a few days ago. Because it's a strange economic system where those who do nothing make the billions. And then they can buy up everyone who does something. So, what does Mr. Facebook do? Nothing. He makes makes you talk to each other on Facebook. He doesn't take money from you when you're talking to your friend, but he makes money by tapping your conversation and selling it for surveillance and selling it to Mr. Trump and selling it to advertisers. Do you know Mr. Trump's election was won on Facebook records? Every day the Trump team would sit with an analysis that we got from big data out of Facebook records. Every day, 70,000 advertisements on Twitter and other things would be sent off. And the way it's analyzed is, oh yeah, I'm talking to you, I do have this little bit of a hate for women. Tap him for messaging. Oh, this person's been talking about Muslims in the neighborhood. Tap him for hate for immigrants. And the blacks, the women, the immigrants. So out of, a slight conversation that you might have informally with a close friend, that then becomes the way to manipulate, to target you with advertisement, so that this subtle conversation you had now becomes an overt language. And these are created into new voters' constituencies. People don't know. People have no idea that they're part of this group. But it will be made. And so it isn't that people are automatically becoming more hateful. It's not that society is tending towards that. It's being engineered towards that. And that too is by breeding a kind of a monoculture. In the case of the US and Europe, it is about white supremacy. In the case of India, it's about supremacy of a very fake idea of what this country is, which has no place for the diversity of this land. For its languages, for its ways of growing food, eating food, for its dressing, for its buildings. It's one monoculture. One monoculture. In India and globally. And it's a monoculture that's excluding more and more, because as I said, life is about diversity. And life lived in freedom is about diversity. So when nature lives in freedom, she will be diverse. When society lives in freedom, society will create cultural diversity. I mean, even in Garhwal is one region, we would think it's one region. No, every valley has a different way of dressing. Every valley. Every valley has a different color. Some women love their blues. The next one loves their magentas. Yeah? And that diversity is what is under threat, but that diversity is precisely what we have to protect and grow the future from. For food, we definitely need diversity. We've got a chapter. I mean, I've written about. Oh, I must read this out to you, because part of the problem we've had, part of the reason we have a monoculture of the mind, is because we had a mechanistic idea of the world for 200 years with the fossil fuel age. And once you had fossil fuels, then you could run machines on fossil fuels, and then you could extrapolate to the world and say, it's a which machine? The world is a machine. And when I was doing my book on the Green Revolution in '84, I read every book that is taught in Agriculture University. Soil book, the soil is an empty container for putting in nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium. That's what soil is, not the billions of organisms. A plant is a machine run on the fuel of nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium. No sun, no soil fertility. Take a seed and pump nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium, and it's going to grow. Doesn't. It's bad science. Fake science. Body? Well, what's food? Is the fuel for the body. So if you notice, everything is about calories. But food is not just calories. Why do is food reduced to calories? For that model of the machine, the body as a machine. If food is the fuel for this thing that's a machine, then all you have to measure is the calorie. And once they reduce food to calorie and reduce cultivation to calories, now they're crying because there's only calories. Proteins were forgotten, the dals were forgotten, the oil seeds were forgotten, everything else was forgotten. And of course now they want to fortify. But for me the exciting part is that now suddenly the world is waking up to the fact that the body is not a machine. It's one of the most sophisticated self-organized systems there are in the world. And 3 years ago I was China actually training the strategic establishment. Obviously it didn't work because they've now bought up Syngenta, and India is their first target for pushing GMOs. That's another question. And they've called scientists from different fields. And it was basically about GMOs, but scientists who talked about soil. We work on biodiversity in that. And then there was one scientist who just mentioned the gut. So this is from a new book on how the gut, through the food we eat, shapes the mind. There's a mind there and a body here. Now that's a very fake separation. The mind is in every cell of our bodies. And how do those cells work? They work through the amazing work that is done by trillions of microbes in our gut. It's been called the enteric nervous system. There are more than 50 to 100 million nerve cells here. They are the ones who are then producing the enzymes, producing the neurotransmitters. It's not that this basic nutrients thing is more mass, right? Conservation of mass. So if you have this much calcium, that much calcium will go to the body. No. If this much calcium and this amazing ecosystem turns it into hundreds of other things, which are not in the food that you eat. The same is with the soil. You put the organic matter and it's creating all kinds of nutrients, which the plant gets. And that continuum of life, I think, is what indigenous cultures understood through the practice of life. They understood it through spirituality. And now, just because we do have microscopes, we can look beyond the obvious, and whatever was known in indigenous science. The other wonderful thing I found is, these nerve cells that are sensor cells, these books can't figure out why we have bitter sensors. But in Ayurveda, it tells you that you should daily eat 6 tastes. So the apricot chutney they were making, that has a little bit of sour in it. So you must have the sweet, you must have the sour, you must have the sour, you must have the astringent, you must have the pungent, and bitter. You must have enough karela. What's the bitter in Ladakhi diet? Anything you eat that's slightly bitter? Some herbs or something?
There was a grain.
There
was a grain.
Something that is unknown.
Yes.
They made some flavoring.
Huh? We make something that's called bacha.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think diversity now we are realizing is not just the obvious biodiversity, not just the obvious cultural diversity we see, but the amazing capacity of self-organization to the tiniest level. And one reason I deal so strongly with forces that destroy this diversity is because I can see what the consequences are. I see what the consequences are for for the world, which has to run on uniformity. It requires all of those fossil fuels which then melt the glaciers in Ladakh. 2010, 2007, you had the disasters here. And there are two films. You can see one is called Climate Change at the Third Pole. Before Copenhagen, we did a whole yatra, and we ended it in Leh. We began it in there. And there are participatory studies on shrinking of glaciers, extreme events, etc. But also, glaciologists have done the studies on the glaciers. That uniformity is very costly to maintain. Because politically and culturally it means a lot of violence. And we are seeing it in India right now. The violence of a particular culture wanting to define what India is. And I would even say, there's wonderful Rinpoche, Samdog Rinpoche, who used to be the elected Prime Minister of His Holiness's government in exile, when His Holiness stopped being an administrator. He said, I'll just be the spiritual leader. And for 2 times, then Rinpoche was the one. And he used to come, only last year he said, I'm too old, I must meditate now, I'm just going to be a Buddhist monk, no more. And he used to always point out, he says, you cannot talk about the cultures of violence. The reason you can't talk about cultures of violence is culture is that which holds. We have an actual, in Hindi and Sanskrit we have different words. We have the word Sanskriti. Sanskriti is that which binds, binds people together. And Vikriti is that which splits people up. It's a similar meaning of the word dharma. Dharma, the right livelihood, is that which holds. Adharma is that which tears apart. So, constantly, all ancient traditions have understood that if everything is diverse but interconnected, then our duty is to respect the diversity of the other while living the interconnection with the other. Because it's not diversity in atomistic form. It's diversity in interconnected form, which is a miracle. Just think of it, it's a miracle. That I'm related to you, but I don't have to force you to be something else. I'm related to you in terms of who you are. And my duty is to ensure I give you the best. And for this we must turn to nature. Does any plant tell us I won't give this year's barley till you pay me a royalty? Just generously gives the barley. Does a mother say, give me the return on investment? And I think we really have to look at what has been so normalized in our thinking and our discourse, a vocabulary of 5 words. Innovation, investment, job. I've cut an ad from the paper yesterday, and it is about growth, but it's about growth of money. So there's an empty jar with no coins. The second jar has some coins. Third has some more and a little plant is growing. And the fourth jar has coins and a plant growing out of coins. Will someone show me a plant growing out of coins? We've managed to get such ontological confusion in our heads. That what is real and what's not real, what happens in the world and what can't happen in the world, has been totally submerged in what Trump named as alternative facts. But alternative facts didn't begin with him. He just harvested them. They've begun with the Industrial Revolution and the mechanistic ideal. They've begun, in my view, with colonialism and constantly putting down diverse cultures as a justification for the right to civilize them while you're conquering them. And it is time really for a massive resurgence of people in all their diversity. The other thing we were repeatedly told is, if you're a worker, you can work with other workers and create a workers' movement. And if you're a farmer, you can work with other farmers and create a farmers movement. And if you're a woman, you can work in the feminist movement. You know, all of those were artificial silos. Because all of those were things that reduced us in terms of a single function of what we do in society. But all of us are diverse. Each of us is diverse in ourselves, but we're also diverse in the many things we do. And because of that reason, I think the time really has come to recognize that cultural diversity and biodiversity is both our source of individual freedom, but our source of collective freedom and our source of planetary freedom. And it's only by being totally local we will be totally planetary. It's only by being totally unique will we contribute to humanity. It's only by protecting our diversity of local foods will we actually create a system that lets no one go hungry. It means lots of switches of accepted paradigms, but the accepted paradigm has nothing to offer for most people for the future. It just doesn't have anything to offer. Did you want a little bit of dialogue? Did you want something?
Yeah, I think some people may have questions.
Yeah.
First of all, it's a very pleasant and unexpected opportunity in my travels to have this kind of event here. Thank you to the organizers and thank you for joining. My question is about responsibility. I consider now myself as a tourist. I come here, stay 5 days, go away. But how do we build this responsibility to the people who are really impacted? And before letting you answer, I just say I'm looking around and there's more tourists like me than locals. So how do we spread this awareness?
Okay, so the first thing is, this too is part of globalization, frankly, because, Ladakh was part of the frontier areas of India. The Chinese had invaded a bit of it, 62, and it was out of bounds. You need a very special permission, and Indians weren't allowed. I couldn't come here. And because the religion of today is money making, wherever there's an opportunity, there is a flooding. You know, if there's one nice stream, then there must be 50 guest houses built along it. So we don't know when enough is enough. We've forgotten the idea of limits. Which is why they are more Ladakhis then, more tourists than Ladakhis. But not in winter. You know, in winter it will be Ladakhis again. But the beautiful thing is, there are people like Stanton doing this. The people like the Women's Alliance. Tomorrow we'll be having 25-year celebration of the Ladakh Environment and Health Organization. So when you talk of responsibility, I think the first is the responsibility, of course, of the host. And we're in a place where the host has shown such amazing responsibility that everything has been built with such care. Just because there's, Ladakh is such a popular tourist destination. Stanton hasn't destroyed the space, She's created something beautiful which makes us all happy to sit here. Then is the responsibilities of the visitors. And I've always felt, for example, I don't know if it's true too, but Ladakh had this very strong rule that when you trek, you have to take all your garbage with you. You can't leave any plastic behind. That's one little gesture. But I would basically add to it, there is a third responsibility. And that third responsibility is the common responsibility. And that common responsibility is what gets built when you become related. You don't just come here to consume a cup of tea or cup of coffee. You come here to establish a relationship with those who started this and with Ladakhi society. And you know, when we are in an interconnected world, there really isn't an insider and outsider. At what level we are, when the minute you come to Ladakh, you're responsible for Ladakh. You have to live here like it's your home and treat it like your home. Treat it like your home in terms of not destroying it. Not thinking, I can do what I want, I can consume the way I want to, and go off. And they can bear the litter and the garbage. I had a very interesting conversation this morning. You know, I've been very troubled by the explosion of suicides into new areas where commercial crops have been taken. All the suicides this year are where they introduce new programs of monoculture commodities. Just onions, just this, just soybean. But I've also been very worried about the malnutrition, the disease epidemic. I've been very worried seeing mountains. 20 years ago in India, you didn't see garbage. You didn't see garbage. We didn't deal, I mean, if we dealt with plastic, we'd wash the bag and save it to pack something else in it. You didn't throw it away. But I think it's a piece of work I'd love to do if I had the time. Go into a garbage heap and segregate. And segregate according to how much came out of food packaging. The bag you bought the food in, the aluminium, the plastic, including the drinking water. My assessment is roughly 75 to 80%. From homes, what's coming out from homes is food packaging. Yeah? So when we talk waste, it's a big part of the waste. Big part of the waste is you throw away 50% of the food. Big part of the waste is, you know, wasting entire regions. I mean, India is now split into these areas where fertile lands are abandoned. And infertile lands have got a bit of irrigation and are growing crops that don't belong to that region for maybe 5 years, and then it's over. So responsibility for me is about being an earth citizen. And no matter where you travel, you're still part of this one earth. And Ladakh is so special because it's so fragile. For me, theoretically, if someone said there are societies in a high altitude desert that goes down to minus 40 degrees sometimes, theoretically, if someone put that issue to me, I would say it can't be. It's not possible. You can't live. And they've done it. So learning. You know, I think what's happened with the typical tourism is we've been reduced to consumers. And we've been reduced to consumers of monocultures. You want the same burger, you want the same pizza, you know, you want the exactly same things you eat at home. Rather than saying, no, I've come to Ladakh and I will figure out what the Women's Alliance is cooking today. You know? So, I think a respect for the people and the place where you've come to, including with humility accepting your total lack of knowledge. And as a traveler, becoming a student and a learner.
So I'm living in the Netherlands under sea level. So I wonder often, is there even a future for us in the age of climate change? Because sometimes I think everything is just gonna be flooded by the sea. And you see this tendency of many Northern European youth wanting to move to south of Europe and buy land there. And I really, there's this fear about living under sea level and kind of like, maybe I should stay and try to do something and try to change or go somewhere else and build a future there. Do you have any thoughts about living under sea level? Also in Bangladesh, this is the case, right?
Yeah, but you know, I mean, I know it must be a cooked up story, but I remember in fourth grade we learned the story about that boy with a finger in the dye, right? So you did evolve amazing systems to manage to live under sea level. I also know from the person who used to head the European Environment Bureau, she told me the most sophisticated plan for climate adaptation is taking place in Netherlands, because it's not by government, it's by communities. Communities are involved in the planning of adapting to the fact that the sea level will rise. But climate, I call it climate havoc, but climate change makes you think it's a comfortable increase in temperature. You know, no, it's not that. It is unpredictable changes. Here in the desert, snow, rain that floods. You know, in the wet areas, a drought. I mean, all of the south of India today is under drought. Kerala, which is so wet, it has rainforest, has a drought and wells don't have water anymore. And of course, the rivers are dry. So, first of all, if there's a problem, humanity or a part of humanity has created. With my philosophy of being an Earth citizen, you don't run away. You don't run away. You know, Stephen Hawking just gave an interview, and he's suddenly accepting all these problems and saying, oh, humanity has 100 years more on this planet. And then he goes on to say, therefore we must explore other planets. So then I wrote back and I said, no. Something was buzzing. I said, no, you stay home, there's no running away. I mean, those who colonized made enough of a mess of this planet. First of all, there is no life on other planets. And you can do any amount of experiments with Mars, and, you know. They're paying billions to scientists to grow food on Mars, to do experiments.
Yeah.
They're doing experiments here by trying to create conditions. Then they keep sending off people to explore. Oh,